So imagine you're just making coffee one morning. You're going through your completely normal routine.
Right, just a regular day.
Yeah, but you turn around, and sitting right there on your kitchen table is this thick, official-looking notice.
Oh, wow.
And it has that, like, the distinct heavy weight of something permanent. You pick it up, you open it, and it simply says, "You have been found guilty."
That is terrifying.
Right. But here's the twist. You look down at the bottom of the page, and the signature on the verdict, well, it's in your own handwriting.
And not just your normal handwriting either. The source material specifically describes it as, the handwriting you use when you're tired
Oh, yeah.
or distracted or jotting down a phone number you already know by heart. It's that loose, unstudied script.
It's so visceral.
It really is, because it provides this immediate, undeniable proof that this isn't some bureaucratic mistake, like, you wrote this.
Exactly. And it's like a perfect image to start with, because it really sets the stakes for today's deep dive.
For sure.
We're looking at this deeply surreal, honestly incredibly profound text by Max and Claude called The Library of Transformations.
It is quite the read.
It really is. Reading it feels like stepping into this, I don't know, this blend of Jorge Luis Borges' infinite impossible spaces mixed with Franz Kafka's inescapable bureaucracies.
Oh, definitely.
And then it just layers on a literal masterclass in Carl Jung's psychological theories.
It's a completely fascinating synthesis of all those elements, though, it's worth noting right away how it deliberately breaks away from the Kafkaesque tradition.
Right. How so?
Well, in something like Kafka's The Trial, the authority is this faceless, unlocatable government. The true horror for the protagonist is not even knowing the law they broke.
Oh, right. They're just completely in the dark.
Exactly. But in this library, the authority is strictly internal. The standard you violated is your own.
That's so much worse, in a way.
It is, because that makes the verdict completely unappealable. You can't argue that the judge misunderstood the context of the evidence, because you are the judge, and your own memory is the evidence.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the physical, metaphorical space of this library.
Let's do it.
We're going to use the sources to understand how human beings actually process our own guilt. The choices we chose not to make.
The heavy stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And how turning around to face our own internal shadow might actually be the exact mechanism that sets us free.
So to really grasp how we process that internal guilt, we first have to look at how the mind's architecture functions when we are desperately searching for answers.
Right.
Because the library described in the text isn't just some spooky setting. It's an active psychological mechanism.
And it is a deeply bizarre mechanism at that. Even arriving there totally defies normal logic.
It really does.
The text describes it as this building you've always seen out of the corner of your eye your whole life. But you could never quite remember it until you actively needed to.
Yes.
And the moment you walk through those doors, the physics of the foyer immediately signal that you aren't in the external world anymore.
Right, the front desk.
Yeah. For instance, you walk up to the front desk and you literally cannot look directly at the clerk's face.
The mechanics of that interaction are just brilliant. Every time you try to focus your eyes on the clerk, your attention is deliberately hijacked by a sudden, incredibly vivid childhood memory.
It's so disorienting.
Or you suddenly recall the exact smell of rain on the pavement from a Tuesday 10 years ago.
So the physical space is actively sabotaging your ability to interact normally. Why does the mind's architecture do that?
Well, it forces your attention inward. It immediately disables your external scanning systems.
External scanning systems, like looking around for threats.
Exactly. In the real world, when we feel threatened, even by just a sense of guilt, our instinct is to scan the environment for clues on how to act, or how to defend ourselves, or how to read the authority figure.
Oh, I see.
By making the clerk's face unviewable, the library strips away your ability to read the room. You can only read yourself.
Wow. And that brings us to the room card the clerk hands you, which is another crazy detail.
Oh, the room card is fascinating.
You look at the card, you see your room number, and you comprehend it perfectly in that specific second. But if you look away for even 5 seconds, the number dissolves completely from your memory.
It just vanishes.
Yeah, it's a destination you can only hold in the exact moment you're looking at it.
Which is a direct disruption of how our working memory operates. From a cognitive standpoint, if you can hold a number or a destination in your mind, you can build a narrative around it.
You can strategize.
Precisely. If I know I'm walking to room 402 to face a mistake I made, I can use the 3-minute walk down the hallway to build an intellectual defense case. I can rehearse all the reasons why I was actually justified.
Oh, right. So by dissolving the number, the library removes the time you'd use to build emotional armor. You're just walking blind.
Exactly. You can't march sequentially toward a known point. You are entirely vulnerable to the environment.
And that environment is shifting constantly. The librarians explain to the protagonist that the corridors aren't laid out chronologically or alphabetically at all.
No, they're associative.
Right. They are purely associative.
Yeah.
The rule is literally your movement is your inquiry.
Such a powerful phrase.
I kept picturing this like a highly advanced social media algorithm, but applied to your soul.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Like how an algorithm eerily feeds you exactly the content you're unconsciously obsessing over, even if you haven't typed it into the search bar.
Right, it just knows.
The library responds to your emotional weight. If you're harboring a specific heavy regret, the corridor's literally done to lead you toward rooms related to that regret.
And what's fascinating here is that the associative architecture completely bypasses the conscious mind's defenses.
Now so.
Usually when we feel guilty about something, we construct massive intellectual structures to avoid it. We might say, I'm upset because of my career, when we are actually upset about how we treated a friend.
Oh, sure. We lie to ourselves.
Exactly. But the library simply ignores the vocalized excuse. It says, I'm going to respond strictly to the actual gravitational weight of your attention.
Wait, okay, I want to push back on this a little. If we are the ones holding the pen on the guilty verdict,
Yeah.
and we are the ones subconsciously directing the corridors, why are we forcing ourselves into this labyrinth in the first place?
That's the big question.
Like, if I know I'm guilty, why not just tear up the notice of the kitchen table, pardon myself, and go about my day?
Because the human psyche demands completion, not just a superficial pardon. We cannot truly pardon what we refuse to fully witness. If you just grant yourself amnesty at the kitchen table without actually examining the act, the guilt doesn't actually vanish. It goes subterranean.
It just hides.
Right. It metabolizes into chronic anxiety or unexplainable defensiveness or just a constant feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
That makes a lot of sense.
The text posits that the mind requires a spatial, physical reality to reckon with what it has buried. You have to walk the corridors because the physical process of navigating the avoidance is the work.
So the physical space forces a confrontation the conscious mind is desperately trying to dodge.
Exactly.
And because the library gives you exactly what your emotional weight asks for, the way different characters navigate these infinite corridors reveals exactly how human beings try to manage psychological baggage.
It's like a personality test for guilt.
Totally. The sources introduce a fascinating cast of other searchers in the building, and they're all handling their guilt with entirely different coping mechanisms.
The searchers are essentially walking archetypes of our own avoiding strategies.
Let's look at Vera. She's described as this older, highly authoritative woman, and she actually found the door to her specific room of guilt on day 2.
But she doesn't go in.
Right, she just stands in front of it in the hallway.
Yeah.
She absolutely refuses to turn the handle.
Yeah.
She tells the protagonist that she doesn't need to go in because she already knows exactly what's inside. She claims she could write a 40-page academic essay on the sociological and personal consequences of her act.
She's completely intellectualized it.
But as she puts it, knowing is not seeing.
That distinction between knowing and seeing is the crux of intellectualization as a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Vera prefers the exhaustive, incredibly expensive mental cost of managing her guilt from the outside. She will write a 40-page essay in her head every single day to avoid the raw vulnerability of witnessing the act from the inside.
It totally reminded me of leaving a terrifying medical bill unopened on the kitchen counter.
Oh, that's perfect.
You know exactly what it is. You know it's a massive debt. But there's this irrational, protective part of the brain that genuinely believes as long as the envelope remains sealed, the debt isn't fully real yet.
Yep. Out of sight, out of mind.
The sealed envelope gives you the illusion of control. But Vera explicitly states she's terrified that if she opens the door, she won't find a flawed person making a mistake. She'll find a monster.
And that reveals the psychological trap of avoidance. Vera's logic feels protective, but the mechanism is actually self-destructive.
Wait, really? Isn't she right to be terrified? What if opening the door actually breaks her?
From a psychological standpoint, avoidance acts as a magnifying glass for shame. When we refuse to look at a past act, The brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, treats the unknown as an infinite threat.
Because it doesn't know the boundaries of what it's afraid of?
Oh. Exactly. Because she won't look at the specific reality of what she did, it ceases to be a defined mistake and expands to become a defining characteristic of her entire identity.
Oh, wow.
Vera believes the closed door is keeping her safe from the monster, but the act of keeping the door closed is exactly what is feeding the monster.
That is so heavy.
Oh.
But the text does provide a brilliant contrast to Vera's paralysis, right? To the children navigating the library.
Yes, the children are a totally different story.
There's this one moment where a child is just power walking down the corridor. They're touching the doors, just feeling which handles are warm.
So direct.
Yeah, and the child states they're simply looking for the one real lie they told. They find the right room, open the door, stand in the doorway for exactly 3 minutes, close it, and then confidently walk toward the exit.
It's a staggering moment of clarity in the text.
Right.
The child can do this because they haven't yet spent decades building the massive, rigid adult scaffolding of avoidance, context, and rationalization.
They just deal with it.
They acknowledge they told a lie, they actively seek it out, they look at the reality of it without projecting a monster onto it, and they leave. They haven't practiced the art of not looking the way Vera has.
But the text also shows us the danger of looking for too much scaffolding.
Yeah.
That brings us to Tomas.
Tomas.
He represents almost the inverse of the child's quickness. Tomas found his room in 10 steps. It happened so fast that he felt he hadn't built up the necessary readiness to face it.
He wasn't prepared.
Exactly. So he spent the next 6 months walking backward through the corridors, trying to find all the context.
Walking backward for 6 months.
Yeah. He wanted to find the room showing who he was before the act, what his childhood was like, what external pressures led him to the mistake.
Tomas demonstrates how the search for context can subtly warp into another form of avoidance.
How so?
Well, the psyche does need the full story, not just the climax of the mistake. However, Tomas is caught in the trap of infinite context. He believes if he can perfectly map out every single external factor that contributed to his action, he won't have to take ultimate responsibility for the action itself. He's basically just stalling.
Moving between these extremes, like Vera's absolute paralysis, the child's directness, and Tomas's endless stalling, we finally arrive at our protagonist.
The main event.
Right. They eventually stop trying to perform the search correctly, they stop opening doors sequentially, and just surrender to the library's associative gravitational pull.
They let go.
And this leads them right to the room of their defining guilt.
And the text subverts our expectations here. Given all the surreal, Kafkaesque buildup, we might expect a grand theatrical torture chamber behind that door.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's exactly the opposite. The protagonist turns the handle, and the room is small. It's quiet.
Just a normal room.
Yeah, it's bathed in this very ordinary amber late afternoon light. And inside, sitting at a desk, is simply a version of themselves, just going through the motions of an ordinary Tuesday.
So what specific act are they witnessing?
On the desk, there is an unanswered message from someone they were deeply responsible to in the real world.
Okay.
And the message is just one sentence. I need to know if this is true.
Wow.
And the version of the protagonist at the desk reads it and does nothing. They actively choose silence.
Just ignores it.
Yep. The internal narration reveals that for years, the protagonist told themselves the silence was a form of mercy. They convinced themselves that telling the truth would hurt the other person too much.
That's a classic rationalization.
Exactly. But standing in the doorway of the library, stripped of all their defensive narratives, the protagonist finally admits the silence was pure self-protection. They just didn't want to deal with the messy, uncomfortable consequences of telling the truth.
This quiet, ordinary scene introduces the core psychological mechanism of the entire text. It's the concept of differentiation.
Differentiation. Okay, break that down for us.
We touched on this idea with Vera's monster, but guilt usually lives inside the human body as a massive, undifferentiated blob of anxiety. It feels like everything you've ever done wrong and everything you might ever do wrong, all tangled up together in a knot of vague existential dread.
Yeah, that heavy feeling.
The library's greatest act of mercy is taking that infinite, paralyzing blob and differentiating it. It forces you to look at the act at a strict human scale.
That feels a bit like turning on the overhead light in a dark bedroom because you're terrified of a shadowy monster in the corner, right?
Exactly.
Only to realize the monster is actually just a messy pile of laundry draped over a chair. I mean, it's still a mess. You still have to do the work of folding it and putting it away. but it's a specific workable mess. It's not a monster coming to eat you.
That analogy aligns perfectly with how the brain processes fear and task management. Neurologically, when we face a vague existential threat, the monster in the dark, our brain activity is centered in the amygdala, triggering a freeze response.
So we just lock up.
Right. We are paralyzed. But when we translate that threat into a specific, defined task like folding the laundry or admitting to a specific act of cowardice, the brain activity shifts toward the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, the logical part.
That's the area responsible for executive function and problem solving. By differentiating the guilt, the library shifts the protagonist out of the amygdala's freeze response. It says, you did this specific thing in this specific context for this flawed reason, but you are the observer in the doorway, not the act itself.
I understand the neurological benefit of reducing the threat, for sure. But I have to ask, doesn't scaling the act down to a small human-sized failing risk minimizing the actual harm that was done?
That's a really important question.
Like out in the real world, someone was left waiting, begging for the truth, and the protagonist ignored them. If we just frame it as, oh, it was just a pile of laundry, a small human mistake, are we just finding a new, sophisticated way to let ourselves off the hook?
That is a vital distinction to make, and the text is very careful about this. Seeing the act at a human scale does not diminish the external harm caused to the victim.
Okay.
What it diminishes is the self-obsessed shame that prevents the wrongdoer from taking accountability. Think about it. If you genuinely believe you are a monster, you cannot apologize or make amends because a monster is fundamentally broken and beyond repair.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The only logical action for a monster is to hide.
So the immense shame actually becomes an excuse for inaction.
Exactly. But if you accept that you had a human failing, that you were cowardly in a specific moment because you prioritized your own comfort, well, a human failing can be addressed. You can take responsibility for cowardice.
Because you're human.
Right.
Yeah.
Differentiation isn't about minimizing the impact on the victim. It's about making internal repair possible so you can eventually offer external repair.
That shifts the perspective entirely. So the protagonist sees the specific act, recognizes the cowardice, and the guilt is differentiated. But the guilt doesn't magically vanish.
No, it doesn't.
You don't get a certificate of completion and a direct elevator back to your kitchen. What do you actually do with this workable mess? How do you leave the library?
That requires moving into the deeper corridors, and that is where we meet the character of Joseph the cartographer.
Joseph is such a compelling figure. He is sitting in a small alcove in the hallway, just meticulously drawing a massive, complex map of his own library.
He's mapping it all out.
Yeah, and he explains to the protagonist that the mapping is the work. Through his mapping, he realizes that you are not just the single room of your worst mistake. You are the entire infinite corridor.
He introduces the concept of the aggregate self.
Yes, because the protagonist starts seeing other rooms beyond the room of their guilt.
Right.
They see the room of the almost move, showing the life in the city they almost relocated to.
Right.
More importantly, they see the room of the father. Inside that room, a version of the protagonist actually sat down, leveled a difficult power dynamic, and had the incredibly brave, vulnerable conversation they'd been avoiding right before their father passed away.
It's a beautiful moment.
It is. The map proves you are the coward at the desk, but you are also the brave person with the father. You are all of those rooms. And then Joseph points out the unopenable door.
The unopenable door might be the most challenging concept the author's present.
It threw me for a loop, I won't lie.
The librarian explains to the protagonist that this specific door is completely cool to the touch, and the handle absolutely will not turn. It contains a version of the self that the searcher simply isn't ready to witness yet.
Right.
And the text notes that it isn't locked because it holds a darker, more terrifying shadow. It's locked because it requires, quote, the willingness to be surprised by your own goodness.
I am really struggling with the mechanics of that. I understand being terrified of opening the door to find a monster like Vera, but why would a person be terrified of their own goodness?
Sounds weird, right?
It seems completely counterintuitive to human nature. Wouldn't we want to see ourselves as good?
If we connect this to the bigger picture to understand why goodness can be terrifying, we have to clearly define Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, which the source material leans heavily on here.
Okay, let's get into the Jungian stuff.
When people hear shadow work, they often assume it just means confronting your evil, repressed, toxic traits.
Yeah, the dark stuff.
But in Jungian psychology, the shadow is simply anything about yourself that you have repressed because it doesn't fit the conscious story you tell about your identity.
So the shadow is just the rejected pieces, regardless of whether they are good or bad.
Exactly. If you are someone who has spent your entire adult life building an identity around being fundamentally broken, flawed, or unworthy, perhaps as a defense mechanism to avoid taking risks, then encountering your own capacity for profound goodness, cumulability, and healing is a massive threat.
It shatters your worldview.
Yes. If you acknowledge that you are capable of immense goodness, you suddenly have the terrifying responsibility to live up to it.
Oh, wow.
It is often much easier to stay in the familiar comfort of your own guilt than to step into the unknown territory of your own potential. The unopenable door stays locked until you are brave enough to let go of your identity as a permanent failure.
That makes the concept of integration so much clearer. It actually made me think of the camera roll on our smartphones.
Oh, I like that.
We all have that one terrible blurry photo where our eyes are half closed, the lighting is awful, and we just look terrible.
Definitely.
If you zoom all the way in on that one specific photo and stare at it for years, you start to think, this is who I am, I'm a disaster.
Right.
But integration is just the act of pinching the screen and zooming out. You see the blurry photo, yes, but you also see the entire album. You see the beautiful landscapes, the pictures where you're laughing with friends, the moments of deep joy.
So you see the whole context.
You realize you aren't just the blurry photo. You are the entire complex camera roll.
That analogy captures the exact shift in perspective the library is trying to facilitate. You zoom out from the single room to the architecture of the whole life.
Right.
The goal of shadow work is not to defeat the darkness or to lock the bad rooms and throw away the key. The goal is integration, weaving the blurry photos and the beautiful landscapes into a single, cohesive narrative.
So what does this all mean? How do we actually use this?
Well, you don't leave the library by escaping it or outsmarting the associative corridors. You leave when you internalize the map. You carry what the authors call a portable library back into the real world.
But practically speaking, how do we function out here in the real world with an infinite corridor of alternate choices in our heads?
It sounds overwhelming.
Yeah, if we're constantly aware of every divergence, every past mistake, and every potential what-if, doesn't carrying that portable library just lead to absolute decision paralysis?
It's a natural concern, but the text illustrates that the opposite is true. The portable library doesn't create paralysis. It creates a vital split-second pause between an emotional impulse and a physical action.
A pause.
Yes. Before you send a cruel email out of anger, or before you choose silence to protect your own comfort, you feel the vast architecture of your own mind. You pause and ask yourself, which room am I building with this specific choice?
Wow.
It fundamentally shifts your daily goal. It replaces the impossible, paralyzing goal of perfection with the grounded, achievable goal of honesty. You know you are going to build flawed rooms in the future because you are human. But with the portable library, you build them consciously, not blindly.
It changes the objective from trying to be a flawless architect to simply being wide awake to your own floor plan.
Which is the definition of true psychological mobility.
So if you're tracking with us, look at the journey we've just taken through this source material.
It's been a ride.
We started at the kitchen table, receiving an undifferentiated, overwhelming notice of guilt that we wrote ourselves.
Right.
We entered the mind's architecture, navigating corridors that respond to our heaviest emotional weights. We explored the traps of avoidance, whether it's staring at unopened doors like Vera or stalling with infinite context like Tomas.
We saw it all.
We finally stood in the amber light of a small room, translating a massive, shadowy monster into a specific, workable, human-sized act of self-protection. And instead of letting that single act define our entire identity, we zoomed out. We integrated the good rooms and the bad rooms, internalized the map, and walked back out into the real world.
And the final scene of the text shows us exactly what that mobility looks like in practice, taking the internal realization and making it relational in the external world.
It really does.
Yeah.
3 months after the protagonist leaves the library, they are sitting at their desk in the real world, just an ordinary day.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the wood of the desk feels warm under their hand. It's the residual warmth of the unopenable door finally unlocking in their mind.
I love that detail.
They pull out a piece of paper, and they finally write a message to the person they wronged all those years ago. The message doesn't make elaborate excuses, and it doesn't offer a 40-page essay of context to protect the protagonist's ego.
No stalling.
Exactly. It simply begins with one direct, integrated sentence. I owe you something true.
It is the ultimate proof that facing the internal shadow doesn't isolate you. It actually reconnects you to humanity.
We want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Take a moment to look at your own internal corridor. Think about the rooms you've been actively avoiding by keeping the door shut.
Really think about it.
What is the unwritten sentence currently sitting on a desk in your mind? And who in your life is waiting for you to open the door, step out of your own protective guilt, and return their truth to them? Because somewhere, sitting on a kitchen table, there might just be a notice waiting for you.
And it is written in your own handwriting.